Hey guys, welcome back to Anti Economics, and today we're back with podcast 14. Should billionaires be taxed more? Hosted by myself and Alan.
But before we get into it, we obviously do have tweet of the week. Now, today's tweet of the week is a tweet about businesses. Should businesses have larger savings set aside in case of future economic travesties like the COVID pandemic, which can still strike at any moment? Comment down below what you think. And let's get into it. The
Yeah,
tweet is kind of on the lines of the billionaires being taxing more, in the sense that big industries, individuals, companies, they need to be penalized in times like this. Do you think that's the case?
well, I don't think we should have the governments bailing out these businesses. They are very wealthy and rich, especially the large corporations. Maybe for smaller corporations, which can be used to level up the economy, essentially, they could be given receive. Sorry, they can be given support by the government to help them get through such a time like this. Whereas I think larger businesses should have savings set aside. What do you think?
I do agree with you. I think that larger businesses have a responsibility as well, to save up for a rainy day. That's why I personally have something against the airline industry, for example. These airline industries, most of these companies have not been setting aside this kind of money for a rainy day. And, now the COVID pandemic has come, they were all turning to governments for bailouts. And although I think that they don't deserve it, in a way, it's almost inevitable that they will be bailed out. It's kind of like the big banks in the 2008 crisis. We do have to bail them out at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think they definitely take advantage of the situation and the circumstance they're in because at the end of the day, if they go bankrupt, then there's going to be issues with our tourism industry, and the government can't have that, especially in this sort of situation where we need to try and generate as much revenue as possible in
Yeah,
obviously a safe way. They need to get these airlines back up and running, but then
yeah,
again, it shouldn't come down to using taxpayers' money to get them out.
yeah. I think personally, I do agree with that. I think that um, the government maybe perhaps should invest in looking into more financial regulations for these companies, perhaps. As they did with the banks, they have to have a minimum reserve requirement in place to prevent bankruptcy. In a similar kind of way, do you think that these airline industries, or these kind of industries which are vital for the functioning of global activity, do you think that governments need to be more strict on how they save money, and whether there should be a minimum amount of money that they save?
Well, I think it's very hard to regulate, obviously, how much money certain airlines save, but I think there should be some sort of rule of thumb. You can't just expect to be bailed out every time. Maybe you can have a one strike policy, or there can be exceptional circumstances where the bailout can be given. I think, obviously, depending on year, different airlines will save different amounts of money. If they invest in a brand new fleet of aircrafts, it will be heavily
Mm.
taken out of these savings. So I think it's hard to regulate something like that, but maybe by giving them sort of a lifeline would be a more better way.
Yeah, no, like from my point of view, I only really see two solutions to this, and one is the free market approach, where you don't intervene before, you don't intervene after. The airlines are free to do what they see fit, but then the governments aren't allowed to bail them out. And what that should lead to is that more airlines will save up for the rainy day because they know they're not going to get bailed out. But obviously, there's the issues with unemployment generated, and tourist industry taking a hit, for example. So then the other solution I kind of advocate is, tighten the regulations. Even though it might be unfavorable for companies, uh, it still needs to be done, because essentially you're saving taxpayers from paying this in the future, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's difficult for that free market solution to actually occur because there's always a possibility. Well, if something like this pandemic happens again in 2 years' time, may
Mm.
say businesses did save and they have got through that sort of rough patch, they then
Yeah.
hit again, and then it will just collapse, and then there's a problem of not having
Mm.
an airline. You have mass employment, as you mentioned, and there will be a lot more bigger consequences as a result of that.
Mm. Yeah, no, I completely agree. Um, in terms of kind of shifting away from companies and more into high net worth individuals,
Yeah.
obviously we've seen the rise of Jeff Bezos, most notably, all of these billionaires who've actually profited from the pandemic astronomically. We've seen people's net worth, almost double in this period of time. Do you think this newfound wealth for the rich, bearing in mind that the rest of the population, the poorer people, they're the ones that are suffering the most. Do you
Yeah.
think that kind of rise in inequality should govern kind of a rebalancing in income by tax?
Yeah, so it's a very, it's a big question to answer. Should the rich be taxed more? We've had thoughts about the wealth tax, which is being put into certain countries in Europe, and it has worked to an extent. But
Mm.
there's always a problem. Rich people, they find a way to evade this tax. They find loopholes within the system. So I think they should be taxed. I think they should be taxed more. I feel like the bracket should be put higher for people who are earning substantial amounts of money, because at the end of the day, they are earning such large amounts of money. They own such great wealth within the world that it
Mm.
should be redistributed to the poorer parts of the country, the poorer parts of the world. What's
Mm.
your opinion?
I mean, I agree with the progressive tax system. I do think it's fair and it is necessary. However, to go to the rich people in times like this and tax them more based on the reason that they're earning more, I think that's unjustified. I think that it's unfair if you're promoting a system like Western societies are, and you're promoting the growth of businesses and you're promoting, innovation, growth, all these things, and the people such as Bezos and all the other billionaires, they are doing well in this situation. They are taking advantage of it, and for their success then to be punished and taxed in order to supply perhaps the less successful people in society, I think that's quite unfair, and I think that will kind of place a bit of doubt for people who want to progress further.
Yeah, so I think I have to agree with you for some points there. So I have to say, obviously, there's definitely a point. If you're going to start taxing people, the more they earn, you're going to sort of disincentivize people to earn more and sort of develop their
Exactly.
economies
Yeah.
within their countries, and that is obviously detrimental for economic growth. So no one would actually do that in their right mind.
I
But
also
yeah, go on.
I was just gonna say there's also like a kind of moral argument here. They've worked for their money.
Yeah,
I'm not advocating the tax fraud and stuff. People like those should be punished. But I'm saying the billionaires that have gotten their wealth from the growth of their businesses that they've made, and they're utilizing their tools to most efficiently make money. I think there's nothing wrong with that, and I think that they shouldn't be taxed to such a severe extent as which loads of socialites would argue.
do you think they get taxed enough though?
I think the amount of money you earn, because correct me if I'm wrong, the income tax, it's a percentage that stays constant no matter how big the sum is, isn't it? Up after a
Yeah,
certain tax bracket.
yeah, there's bands, yeah.
Yeah, so is it 55% or something? 45%?
I think it's 50 something, yeah.
Okay, whatever the highest income tax bracket is, these billionaires, these multi-million earning people, they're still getting taxed 45 to 50% of that million or $1 billion income, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's a huge injection into the economy. They're contributing more than like hundreds and thousands of these lower income earning people, and they're doing their share of kind of investment into society. So I think that in order for them to increase the tax even more, is quite unfair. And I think, although I can see the justifications of it, I think morally, I think there is a problem with that.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think around 50% to be taxed is a lot of your income. When you're looking at billions and billions of pounds, obviously it's
Mm.
still you're left with quite a large amount of money left, but you're still being taxed quite a lot. Just linking back to stuff about how we was talking about government bailouts and things like that.
Yeah.
So obviously, if say these rich billionaires earn a lot of money and it gets taxed, and then it's then spent not actually on the people and on society, it's more spent on these bailouts for these big companies. Should
Mm.
things like that occur?
See, that's the issue. That's where I want more regulations to happen in terms of saving for the rainy day. It is quite sad because essentially we're just paying the companies for their own resurrection, and I think that's
Yeah.
completely unfair. And but I would say that there's nothing we can really do. We can't survive without airline companies. we couldn't survive without the banks in 2008. These are all things that are so intrinsic in society. We have to bail them out. And so, although I strongly don't like it, it's something that, we kind of have to firm.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. I think it's something that sort of has to be done. We need these sort of companies in our way. I think there's definitely a call for action for these, definitely, because a lot of these big businesses, the owners of these businesses, the shareholders are very wealthy in themselves.
Yeah.
So they should be, injecting more of their own money if they want to keep their own business afloat. But
Yeah.
again, for when we talk about these sort of essential sort of businesses which are required day to day,
Yeah.
especially for the economy, they are sort of needed to be bailed out.
One thing that I was reading about earlier, it's kind of linking back to the billionaires tax, is people advocating that billionaires need to be taxed more, and they claim figures like Jeff Bezos is worth 170 billion, blah blah blah. Well, I don't think people understand that Jeff Bezos doesn't actually have 170 billion dollars
Yeah.
in cash. They're all stock representations. And for Jeff Bezos to then suddenly, I don't know, give half of his wealth away, he'd have to, offload so many Amazon shares. And, that's going to have effects which contradict what these higher tax advocates want. If he unloads shares, Amazon will go down. Amazon goes down, unemployment increases. It's going to affect all sorts of the economy. So I think that's one thing I'd like to, highlight when
Yeah.
people talk about taxing these billionaires. They don't have that much in cash.
Yeah, I think when comments like that are made, I think mainly because they're getting this all from the media. It's the media portrayal that are portraying these people to have X amount of $1 billion, and places like Forbes that release these stats, which are astonishing at times.
Yeah,
People take them for their raw facts. They don't take them with a pinch of salt, which
yeah,
was
100%,
a bit
100%.
misleading.
Yeah.
Um, just wanted to ask, so what would your opinion be on a wealth tax being introduced in the UK?
Wealth tax. Could you just elaborate on that? What do you mean
So
specifically?
wealth tax is a tax on, say, all of a person's assets, essentially. So
Mm,
say they have a yacht worth X amount of million, it will be taxed based on that as well, not just income taxed.
mm. Okay. So I can see the kind of basis for that. It prevents people from evading tax. Loads of people invest in, I don't know, assets which aren't taxable, and so they can kind of filter their tax away.
Yeah.
But in terms of, do I think you should be taxed on your whole wealth? I disagree. I don't think you should do that. I think you should tax the income, not the assets, because what that's going to do is not just focusing on the rich people, but even the middle class, upper middle class people. They're people who want to expand their income, and by doing so, they're only helping the economy. And if you're placing taxes on stuff, or if you're placing higher taxes on assets like properties, on boats, cars, things like that, you're
Yeah.
going to be disincentivizing them to grow their to grow their net worth via assets, and so it's going to kind of slow down the progression that we want to see.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. I think it sort of halts and abrupts consumption to an extent.
Mm,
So that's obviously quite a negative thing. We need consumption in our economy to always be thriving. And if you're going to prevent people from buying boats because they don't want to be taxed on them yearly, then
yeah,
I think that's it's not the right way to go about things in the economy. But we have seen successes in other countries,
yeah,
but
yeah.
for the UK, it just wouldn't really work that well.
Mm. That's an interesting point. You talked about the media a couple minutes ago, and how their portrayal was a large reason why loads of these people make these arguments. And I'm a very strong believer in the fact that media should not be associated with politics. There should not be any media outlet that is backed or funded by a political party. Like, no. What's your stance on that?
Yeah, I think the media is it can be a very toxic place. Essentially, it can manipulate things, it can turn things inside out. I
Mm,
think for information like that, I feel like I think to an extent it's personal. If it was myself, I wouldn't want people to know how wealthy I was. So I don't know. I think it's they obviously find out because they work at the value of people's assets, and
mm,
things like Amazon share price are available to the public. So that's how they work out people like Jeff Bezos's net value.
mm-hmm.
But like you said, I don't think politics and media should go hand in hand.
Mm. Do you think economics and politics should go hand in hand? And when I say economics, I mean the governance of financial policies, fiscal policies, do you think politicians should still have that? Because they can use that as a tool for gaining political votes
Yeah.
and other such stuff. So what's your stance on that?
Yeah, I think we've touched on this before. I think obviously we've mentioned that politics and economics does go together. It always will do because every politician will turn around when there's an election and say, "Oh, I'll do this and that, I'll lower taxes," try and get those votes, even though half of it is false promises and false hope.
Yeah,
Whether it should happen, I think, a way of doing it could be a democracy. You have votes on certain policies. What do
yeah,
people want to see? Do they want to see a better infrastructure in the UK? Do they want to see more projects like HS2? If they do, then they should be willing for taxes to go up. If they don't, and they want to see the place become deteriorating, see make it more run down, London will become less of a world city, then low tax brackets. But I think the problem with that is that a lot of people aren't aware of what the consequences will be, and they'll make irrational decisions.
yeah, yeah. No, I completely agree with you there.
Yeah.
So quickly, last finishing ending comments, Ravi. Do you think billionaires should be taxed more?
Personally, I don't think billionaires should be taxed more. I feel like they could perhaps. I think when we talk about large businesses, they should be saving more. They shouldn't rely on government bailouts.
Mm.
But at the end of the day, I don't think they should be taxed more. What do you think?
Yeah, I was going to say that individual incomes for billionaires, they shouldn't be increasing in percentage tax, but you can, I don't see a problem in taxing companies and their turnovers a bit more.
Yeah.
Right,
Excellent.
well, thank you guys for watching
Thank
and
you.
tuning in. Make sure to follow us on Antel Economics at Twitter and be sure to come back next week for another podcast.
Bye, guys.
See ya.